I'm a big fan of this man who's sitting here in the studio. Been following this man's career, his entire career, not only because I've enjoyed it, but when you're from Staten Island, New York, you are mandated to know who Ricky Schroder is and to follow his entire career. And the creator and executive producer of DirecTV's Fighting Season is here on the program. Good to see you.
Yeah, fellow Islander, huh?
For real. PS54, IS-72, Susan Wagner High School. My dad taught in Port Richmond. Okay. I worked for the Staten Island Advance as an intern and 3 years after graduating Michigan. I am the Rock through and through. And I'm not kidding. We would grow up like, wow, there's Ricky Schroder in The Champ with John Voight. There you were on Silver Spoons. There you were on NYPD Blue. I mean, we were all rooting for you, man.
I grew up in Great Kills, 410 Leverett Avenue, went to PS32.
Attaboy.
And moved away when I was 9 to Connecticut, and then moved out here eventually. But still have family there. And you know, who else is from there?
No, there's a lot of, Alyssa Milano's from there, I know that.
And who
else?
And Glenn Scarpelli.
Glenn Scarpelli?
Remember that name?
Of course.
And then
from 80s sitcom.
Yeah, Christina Aguilera, I think, is from there.
Steven Seagal.
Steven Seagal. I mean, we're in good company.
And of course, the Staten Island Streetwise Troubadours, the Wu-Tang Clan from the North Shore of Staten Island. Yeah, but we're all there. It's sort of like a Staten Island reunion right here on the Rich Eisen Show. So you've been there and done that. Obviously, film, television. Why the fighting season, Ricky? Why do this show?
Well, I had several reasons, but one was personal. I just wanted to see what it was like to be, you know, in a place in war. I wanted to see what soldiers felt and what they went through. And that probably stems from, like, my grandfather, Uncle Tiny, who was in the Army in World War II. His name was Uncle Tiny, but he was actually 6'5". But
that's what usually most people tiny.
Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, it's usually because they're over 6 foot.
So I was at the foot of his lazy boy as a child growing up, and he would tell me the stories I think he told nobody else.
Right.
About, you know, what he did in World War II, you know, going through France and into Germany. And he was close support for infantry troops. He had 6 deuce in a house with 50 cals mounted on the back. And so he went through those hedgerows and those roads in those villages for months. And he would tell me these stories, and he'd give me all his old memorabilia he collected during the war. His M1 carbine that he carried and all that stuff. So I think as a little boy, I grew up thinking soldiers are heroes. And they fought evil, and they killed evil, and which they did. And so this war in Afghanistan is coming up on 14 years, and it's 4 years longer now than Vietnam. It's America's longest war. It's an amazing accomplishment. An all-volunteer army has been at war for 14 years. An all-volunteer force was never designed to be at war for 14 years. That's why they have conscription and mandatory drafts. And so these young people that join the Army today, they know they're going to war, and they join anyway. And so I wanted to document for them and for our country what we accomplished in that 14 years, so that one day when we look back, we can say that's how we left it. Whatever happens in Afghanistan, whether it crumbles or it becomes a success story, we'll have this time capsule told from the soldier's perspective of what the fighting season in 2014 looked like.
So you embedded yourself with various United States Armed Forces units for 3 months, correct? You were with them wherever they went for 3 full months, as if you were part of their unit, essentially. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, mostly. So what it was we were only with U.S. Army. We weren't with any other branches of the forces, but we had myself and 4 other cameramen. And so I would embed them in different soldiers doing different missions, and I would rotate through them over the course of, you know, 3 months, moving between them. And so one of the things that's interesting about the fighting season is the perspectives that you see in it. You see everything from the commander, a 3-star general, Lieutenant General Anderson's perspective of the war, down to that specialist who's an infantryman who's walking point, to the guys in the Tactical Operations Center that are hunting terrorists with drones, to the guys that are in Kabul working with the Kabul Police Department as an SFAT advising team, advising the Kabul Police, which is a 13-man paramilitary cops with RPGs force, fighting terrorists in the city. So we look at these embeds, and so you have a big scope of what ending a war looks like, because it's messy and it's hard, and it's never really been shown how you end a war.
I'm here with Ricky Schroder here on the Rich Eisen Show, a creator and executive producer of The Fighting Season that debuts on Tuesday, May 19th on Audience at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, a 6-part miniseries. You can't just knock on the door of the U.S. Army and say, hey, I got some cameras and I'd love to come hang with you in Afghanistan for 3 months. So how did you start that process and get through that, Ricky?
Yeah, so it's about trust with the Army. Everything's based on trust. And so I've had the opportunity to work with them in the past and build some trust. And then I called that trust in. Mm-hmm. And they allowed me access, and they gave us access to places and see things and do things that I don't think they've ever let before. Specifically, like the drone war. How do you develop targets, follow them, and then do the kinetic strikes and the hits mm-hmm. on the terrorists? And so it's trust. It's trust. It's all based on trust. Everything in the Army is based on trust. When you're dealing with people's lives and things, and so they're big on trust. If you break their trust, you get one chance of breaking their trust.
Sure, but I mean, if you're out there, extra folks, cameras,
yeah.
right? I mean, and as we will see, and people can see in the fighting season, things get particularly hairy.
Yeah.
And there you are out there with a camera. They could trust you as much as you want.
Yeah.
But when stuff is going down, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
At some points, did you feel as if you wanted to go grab a gun and start firing it yourself? Ricky, did that ever happen?
No, because I couldn't then film them firing.
Yeah, right.
But gaining the trust of the soldiers that you embed with, the ground force commanders,
Sure.
the platoon leaders, the guys that are going to keep you alive, that are going to feed you and protect you, that's a trick, right? Because if you don't have their trust, then they won't open up and they won't talk to you.
Sure.
It's hard to get their trust. But once you get it, once you've been shot at with them, then sort of like you're one of them. And now all of a sudden you're just the camera guy, and they call you and they say camera guy. And most of them are kids, and they call me camera guy because they didn't know, I've done anything in my past.
So they didn't know your filmography?
No. These guys are 19, 22,
sure.
26. They don't know, have a clue of,
right.
of my past.
Right.
And so anyway, so once we got shot at with them, then boy, they started talking because they realized that, oh my gosh, this guy's willing to follow me, get shot at. He's one of us. And so then sort of the floodgate of stories would open and the access would get easier. So
what did you learn going in that surprised you? I mean, what did you learn through this that surprised you that you did learn it? Maybe you thought that you would expect a lot, or you knew most of what to expect going in. What coming out of this on the back end of the fighting season did you learn? A couple things. One is don't mess with us, because we have the best Army. I can't imagine a better Army. We are not beaten up after 13 or 14 years of war. We are battle tested and hardened, and some of these guys have been through so many deployments that they just know how to choreograph the symphony of destruction. Mm-hmm. They know how to call in all the enablers, the air weapons teams, the artillery, and overwhelm the enemy with firepower so that they don't stand a chance. And so, there's a perception out there that maybe we are hurt, beat up, tired, and yeah, it's taken its toll, and on the families especially. But the soldiers that have learned how to conduct battles and actually fight a battle. Mm-hmm. I think that they're tested, they're proven, they're strong, and they're experienced, and they're passing that on to the next generation of Army leaders and soldiers. And so that's one of the things I learned. And the other thing I learned is that the war looks very different for each person depending on where you're at in Afghanistan and what your mission is. Sometimes it's a pretty easy tour, and sometimes it's not. Ricky Schroder, I can't wait to see this unfold over a month and a half. And I meant it when I said that I have been following your career since I was, as they say, knee-high to a jackrabbit. Yeah. I mean, I've just known you from, that you were a Staten Island guy and seeing how you were succeeding. A lot of us sitting there on the rock was like, okay, if he can do it, maybe I can too. Oh, for real. Very cool, man. Serious. And I'm excited that this is part of the Audience Network as well. Yeah. The fighting season starting Tuesday, May 19th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. 6-part miniseries right here on Audience. Thanks for coming here. Thanks, Rich. You bet.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.